14 degrees in Iowa, and I'm on my belly under my own house, fixing pipes for a woman who's been fixing me for years. Fixing me good and proper, turns out. The crawl space smelled like frozen dirt and mouse droppings, and the particular cold that gets into your bones when you've been lying on your back in it for 20 minutes. I'd done this 100 times. Heat tape, insulation check, wait for the thaw. The kind of work my hands know better than my head does. That's when I saw the bag, tucked behind the main line, wrapped in insulation that didn't match the rest. Pink, where everything else was yellow. Somebody had put it there on purpose. Somebody who knew I wouldn't look twice at pipes I'd maintained for 15 years. I pulled it out. Plastic, the heavy-duty kind. Inside, 3 phones, cheap burners, the kind you buy at gas stations. And underneath them, tied with a red ribbon, like a Christmas gift from hell, a stack of letters. Her handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. My dearest James, my younger brother, my best man. The drip of thawing ice somewhere behind me, my breath fogging in the flashlight beam. My hands didn't shake, not yet. I read them all, every letter, every text. It took me 3 hours in my truck, with the heater running, parked behind the grain elevator, where no one would see a grown man fall apart. I didn't go back inside. Couldn't look at her yet, couldn't trust what my face might do. So I climbed out of that crawl space, walked straight to my F-150, and drove. The grain elevator's been abandoned since '09. Hendrick's family sold out to a conglomerate, and the conglomerate didn't need a local hub anymore. Now it just sits there, rusting against the sky. 100 feet of concrete and metal that nobody wants. Seemed like the right place. I started with the phones, 3 of them, all the same model. Cheap track phones you can buy at any Casey's General Store for $30. 2 were dead, batteries drained, but one still had juice. I thumbed it open like I was defusing a bomb. The text went back 8 months. 8 months of miss you, and can't wait, and Thursday works. Usual place. Logistics, plans, a hotel in Cedar Rapids that I'd driven past 100 times without thinking twice. Coordinates for a life I didn't know existed. Baby, I hate this. She'd written in September? I hate pretending. But it's almost over. Spring's only 6 months away. Spring. What happened in spring? I set the phone down on the dashboard and watched my breath fog the windshield. Outside, the fields stretched flat and white to the horizon, broken only by the black skeletons of trees and the elevator's shadow falling long across the snow. Then I opened the letters. They were older. That was the first thing I noticed. The paper yellowed, the ink faded in places. Some of the envelopes still had stamps on them, postmarked from towns I didn't recognize. She must have kept them all these years, hidden them, moved them from place to place as we moved through our life together. The oldest one was dated March 1999. We got married in September 1999. I did the math 3 times, hoping I'd gotten it wrong. I hadn't. My dearest James, the first letter began, I know we have to wait. I know the timing isn't right. But when I'm with him, I want you to know it's you I'm thinking of. It's always you. He's a good man. That's the worst part. He doesn't deserve what we're doing to him. A good man. That's the worst part. I read that line until the words stopped making sense. Then I read the next letter and the next, 23 of them in all, spanning from before our wedding to just a few years ago, when they must have switched to phones. The story they told wasn't complicated. Connie and James had been together first, really together, back when I thought she and I were just starting out. She'd chosen me for reasons the letters made clear. Stability, reliability, a man who'd stick around. James wasn't ready then. Too young, too wild, too likely to break her heart. So she married me instead and kept him on the side like a savings account she never closed. The truck's heater kicked into a higher gear, blasting hot air that didn't touch the cold in my chest. I thought about all the Thanksgivings, all the Christmases, all the times James had sat at our table and passed the potatoes and asked about my work. All the times I'd slapped him on the shoulder and called him brother. I thought about Ethan, our son, 11 years old, loves baseball, hates math, sleeps with the hallway light on because he's still a little scared of the dark. I thought about the shape of his face, which I'd always said took after Connie. I thought about how he'd be in 6th grade now, probably sitting in class right this minute, not knowing his whole world was a lie. I didn't let myself finish that thought. Not yet. The sun was going down by the time I put the letters back in the bag. My hands had started shaking somewhere around letter 15, and they hadn't stopped since. I pulled out of the elevator lot and drove to my shop, a converted barn on the edge of town where I keep my tools and equipment and the old truck I've been restoring for 6 years. I have a lockbox there, fireproof, combination lock, the kind I use for client deposits when I'm holding money between jobs. I put the phones inside. I put the letters inside. I stood there in the concrete cold, surrounded by table saws and sawhorses and the smell of wood shavings and motor oil, and I looked at that box like it contained a bomb, which I guess it did. My wedding ring caught the light from the single bulb overhead. I touched it without thinking. A habit. 23 years of habit. The metal was warm from my skin. 23 years, I thought. That's a lot of frozen pipes. I didn't know what to do. Confront her, call a lawyer, drive to wherever James was staying and put my fist through his face. The options scrolled through my head like a list of jobs I didn't have the tools for. Tomorrow. I'd figure it out tomorrow. I locked the shop and drove home. Connie was in the kitchen when I walked in, stirring something on the stove, and she smiled at me the way she'd smiled at me for 2 decades. "Pipes fixed?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Pipes are fixed." And I walked past her to the shower, where I stood underwater, hot enough to burn, and still couldn't get warm. I went home that night, made dinner, sat across from her at the table like I'd done 10,000 times. She asked about my day. I said, "Fix the pipes." And that was the truth. I fixed the pipes. I just didn't mention what else I found down there. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I went through the motions like a man walking through water, got up at 5:30, same as always, made coffee in the dark kitchen while Connie slept, drove to whatever job site needed me, swung hammers, cut boards, talked to clients about timelines and budgets and whether they wanted oak or maple for the new cabinets. Normal. All of it so goddamn normal I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I smiled. I nodded. I said, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, sir," and "We'll have that done by Friday." I ate dinner with my family and watched TV with my wife and helped my son with his math homework. And the whole time there was a lockbox sitting in my shop with 3 phones and 23 letters that said everything I thought I knew was a lie. Ethan was the hardest part. Every time I looked at him, I saw the question I couldn't ask yet. He'd gotten tall this year, almost to my shoulder now, and his voice was starting to crack in that awkward way. That means childhood is ending, whether you're ready or not. He had Connie's eyes, her coloring. I used to say he got my stubbornness, my way of sticking with something until it was done. Now I wasn't sure what he'd gotten from me, if anything. "Dad, you okay?" We were at the kitchen table, Thursday night, his geometry textbook open between us. I'd been staring at the same problem for 2 minutes without seeing it. "Yeah, bud, just tired, long week." He nodded like he understood. Kids that age think they know what tired means. They don't, they can't. Mom said Uncle James might come for Easter this year. I kept my face still. Took everything I had. Is that right? Yeah, she was talking to him on the phone earlier. Said it's been too long since we've all been together. I looked down at the geometry problem. Angles and lines and proofs. Everything in math has an answer if you work at it long enough. I used to believe life was like that too. "Here," I said, pointing at the diagram. "You're forgetting to carry the parallel. See? These two are congruent because of the transversal." "Oh, yeah, thanks, Dad." "That's the job," I said, and the words tasted like ash. Friday morning, I was at a job site in Grinnell, bathroom remodel for the Hendersons. Nice older couple. She wanted a walk-in shower because her knees weren't what they used to be. Russ was with me, doing the plumbing rough-in while I framed out the new shower pan. Russ Haggerty's worked for me off and on for 12 years, 58 years old, hands like leather, 2 divorces under his belt, and a liver that quit on him in 2019. He got sober after the transplant. Says the surgeon told him the next drink would be his last, and he believed her. Now he drinks coffee by the gallon and doesn't miss a day of work unless the weather makes the roads impassable. He's also the closest thing I have to a best friend, which probably says something about my life. We worked in silence most of the morning, the way you do when you've known someone long enough that talking feels optional. The radio in the corner played classic country, Merle Haggard, then Willie, then some newer guy I didn't recognize, trying to sound like both of them. Henderson brought us coffee around 10, and we took a break on her back porch, watching the snow melt off the eaves in the thin February sun. "You're quiet," Russ said. "I'm always quiet. Quieter than usual." I shrugged, sipped my coffee. It was good. She'd added a little cinnamon the way my mother used to. "Job stress," I said. "Got a lot on the books right now." Russ didn't answer. He had that look he gets sometimes. The one that says he's not buying what you're selling, but he's too polite to call you a liar outright. "My second wife," he said after a while, "Linda. You know what finally did it? What finally made me see what was happening?" I didn't say anything. Didn't trust my voice. It was little things. The way she'd put her phone face down when I walked in the room. The way she'd take calls in the car instead of the kitchen. The way she started caring about what she looked like again, after years of not giving a damn. He took a long drink of his coffee. I told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself she was just going through a phase. Took me 18 months to admit what I already knew. The snow kept dripping off the eaves. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. "Why are you telling me this?" Russ looked at me. Those pale blue eyes that had seen too much and forgiven too little. Because I've been watching you for 3 days, Dale. And you got that same look I had. That look like you're walking around with a knife in your back, and you're trying to decide whether to pull it out or push it deeper. I set my coffee down on the porch railing, watched the steam curl up and disappear. I found something, I said. Under the house, when I was fixing the pipes. Russ waited. He's good at that, waiting. Doesn't rush you, doesn't fill the silence with noise, just lets you get there on your own. Phones, letters, from Connie. I had to stop, swallow. To James. James, your brother James. Yeah. Russ let out a long breath, not surprised exactly. More like someone who's just had a suspicion confirmed and wishes to God he'd been wrong. How long? The letters go back to before we were married. The texts are recent. 8 months, maybe more. Jesus Christ. Yeah. We sat there. The dog down the street had stopped barking. The only sound was the drip of snow melt and the faint twang of the radio inside. What are you gonna do? I don't know yet. I made a gesture I couldn't have named. Something between a shrug and surrender. I'm still figuring out what's real, what was ever real. Russ nodded. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a pack of gum, juicy fruit, his substitute for the cigarettes he gave up when he gave up drinking. He offered me a piece. I took it. Dale, I gotta tell you something, and you're not gonna want to hear it. I looked at him, waited. A few years back, maybe 4, 5 years ago, I was driving past your place on my way to that job we did out in Newton. Middle of the day, you were working that commercial thing in Ames. Gone for 3 days straight, and I saw a car in your driveway that didn't belong there. My stomach dropped. What kind of car? Silver Audi, nice one. Plates from out of state. James drove a silver Audi, company car, Illinois plates. I told myself it was nothing, Russ said. Family visit. Maybe he was picking something up, dropping something off. None of my business. He looked down at his coffee. I should have said something. I'm sorry, Dale. I should have. What would you have said? My voice came out harder than I meant. Hey, your wife might be screwing around with your brother based on a car in a driveway? I don't know. Something. Anything. And I'd have told you to mind your own damn business. I'd have told you that you were seeing things that James visits all the time, that you don't know what you're talking about. I shook my head. I'd have believed her over you. I'd have believed her over anyone. Russ didn't argue, because we both knew I was right. Hell of a thing, he said finally. Loving someone so much you can't see straight. Hell of a thing. We finished our coffee, went back inside, worked the rest of the day without saying much more about it. But something had shifted between us, the way it does when you share a wound with someone who's got their own scars. He didn't look at me with pity, didn't offer advice or platitudes or any of that garbage people say when they don't know what else to do. He just worked, handed me tools when I needed them, kept the radio on. At the end of the day, when we were loading up the trucks, he stopped me with a hand on my arm. You need anything? He said. Beer, bullet, somebody to help you bury a body. You call me. I'm not going to kill anyone, Russ. I know, but the offer stands. He got in his truck and drove off. I stood there in the Hendersons' driveway, watching his taillights disappear down the road, and for the first time in 4 days, I didn't feel completely alone. That night, I dreamed about the crawl space, about lying on my back in the frozen dark, reaching for something I couldn't quite see. In the dream, the bag wasn't there. The pipes weren't there. There was just empty space where my life used to be, and the sound of water dripping somewhere I couldn't find. I woke up at 3 a.m., with my heart pounding and Connie asleep beside me, her breathing soft and steady, not a care in the world. I lay there until dawn, watching the ceiling, trying to remember who I was before I knew. I started counting backward. First text was dated April. First letter was dated March 1999. We got married in September 1999. Do the math. I've been doing it for a week now, and the numbers don't change no matter how many times I run them. The weekend after Russ and I talked, I told Connie I had to check on a job site in Newton. Permits issue, I said. Needed to meet with the inspector. She nodded, kissed me on the cheek, told me to drive safe. The ease of it, the way lying came to her like breathing, made my skin crawl. I drove to my shop instead. The lockbox was where I'd left it, under the workbench behind a stack of old tile samples. I sat down on the cold concrete floor with my back against the wall and spread everything out in front of me, like evidence in a trial, which I guess it was. The trial of Dale Mercer's entire goddamn life. I'd already read the letters twice, now I read them again, slower, looking for details I'd missed. Dates, places, references to things I might remember differently than she'd described them. I made notes on the back of an old invoice, chicken scratch, that probably looked like the work of a crazy person, but I needed to see the shape of it. The timeline, March 1999, first letter. They were already together. She called him my heart and talked about when we can finally stop hiding. On June 1999, fourth letter. She mentioned meeting my parents for the first time. Said I was sweet and steady and exactly what she needed right now. The word now was underlined. August 1999, seventh letter, the one that stopped my breath. He asked me last night. I said yes. Please understand, this is the only way. You're not ready and I can't wait forever. But it doesn't change anything between us. It never will. He asked me last night. I said yes. I remembered that night, down on one knee in her apartment, the ring I'd saved 6 months to buy, the way she'd cried and said yes and held me like I was the only thing keeping her from floating away. I thought those tears were joy. Maybe they were something else. September 1999, wedding. No letter from that month. I wondered if they'd seen each other anyway. If he'd stood up next to me as my best man, with her taste still on his lips. I put that letter down. Picked up another. The later letters were more sporadic, one every few months, then one a year, then gaps of 2 or 3 years at a time. Life got busy, I supposed. We moved to the new house. Ethan came along. James took the job in Chicago, then the one in St. Louis, then wherever he was now. The distance must have made it harder. But they never stopped. That was the thing. They slowed down, cooled off, went underground, but they never stopped. And then, about 18 months ago, according to the text messages, they started back up again. I've missed you so much, she'd written. Seeing you at Dad's funeral, it all came back. Everything. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending. Dad's funeral. My father's funeral, 2 years ago, February. James had flown in from wherever. He'd stayed at our house for 3 days because the hotels in town were booked with some farm equipment, convention. I'd been so focused on Mom, on handling the arrangements, on keeping everyone fed, and the house running, that I'd barely noticed when Connie and James were in the same room. I noticed now, in memory, rewatching scenes I hadn't paid attention to at the time. The way she'd touched his arm when she handed him coffee. The way they'd stood together at the cemetery, slightly apart from everyone else. The way she'd said she needed to run to the store the second night and came back 2 hours later with one bag of groceries. 2 hours, one bag. I put my head in my hands. The concrete floor was cold through my jeans. The shop smelled like sawdust and old motor oil, and the particular staleness of a space that's been closed. Up too long, you dumb son of a bitch, I thought. You saw all of it, you just didn't want to look. I took one of the letters, the August one, the engagement one, and put it in my wallet. Folded it small and tucked it behind my driver's license where no one would see it. I don't know why. Proof, maybe. A reminder that I wasn't making this up, that it was real, that the ground under my feet had actually shifted, and this wasn't just some nightmare I'd wake up from. I touched it 100 times that week, in line at the hardware store, waiting at a red light, sitting in the truck outside Ethan's school, waiting for him to finish basketball practice. My fingers would find the edge of the paper, trace the fold, and something in my chest would tighten like a fist. Connie noticed I was different. She had to, I'm not that good an actor. You've been quiet lately, she said, Wednesday night. We were cleaning up after dinner, Ethan in his room doing homework, the kitchen warm and bright and full of the ordinary sounds of a life I no longer believed in. Work stuff. Big project coming up. You want to talk about it? Not much to talk about. Just logistics. Yes. She looked at me for a long moment. I kept my eyes on the dish I was drying. A blue plate. Part of the set her mother had given us for our 10th anniversary. I used to think those plates meant something. Now they were just plates. James called today, she said. I didn't flinch, didn't freeze. Just kept drying. Yeah? He's thinking about coming for Easter after all. Wants to see Ethan, spend some time with family. She paused. It's been a while since we've all been together. That right, I said. 2 words. Flat, neutral, the same thing I'd said when Ethan mentioned it. I was getting good at those 2 words. They didn't commit to anything, didn't reveal anything, just filled the space where a normal husband would have said something like, great, or looking forward to it, or tell him to bring that bourbon he likes. Connie waited. I could feel her watching me, trying to read something in my profile. I kept drying the plate. You don't seem excited, she said. I'm fine, just tired. You've been tired a lot lately. It's February in Iowa. Everyone's tired. She let it drop. Because that's what we do. We let things drop. We don't push, don't pry, don't dig into the uncomfortable silences. 23 years of marriage, and I'm only now realizing that our whole relationship was built on not asking questions I didn't want answered. I set the plate in the cabinet, reached for the next one. Maybe we could do a nice dinner, she said. When James is here, that roast you like. Invite your mom. Sure. Dale. Her hand on my arm. I made myself not pull away. What's going on with you? I turned to look at her, my wife. The woman I'd loved for more than half my life. She was still beautiful. Same dark hair, same green eyes that had knocked me sideways at 23. A few more lines around the mouth, a little gray at the temples, but beautiful. And looking at me now, with what seemed like genuine concern. That was the worst part. The concern looked real. Everything about her looked real. How do you spend 2 decades with someone and not know them at all? Nothing's going on, White, I said. I told you, work. If it's money, it's not money. Then what? I almost told her. Right there in the kitchen, with the dishes half done, and Ethan's music thumping through the ceiling from his room. I almost said I found the letters and watched her face change and ended it all in one stroke. The words were right there, sitting on my tongue like a match waiting for friction, but I didn't, because I still didn't know about Ethan. And until I knew whether my son was my son, I couldn't blow everything up. I couldn't risk losing him in the wreckage before I understood what I was even fighting for. I'm fine, Connie. Really. I kissed her forehead. The gesture felt mechanical, like something I'd seen in a movie once and was trying to copy. She softened a little. Believed me or decided to believe me, which might be the same thing. Okay, she said. But if you want to talk, I know, I will. Another lie, adding to the pile. Hers were bigger, but mine were catching up. That night, after she fell asleep, I went out to the garage. We have a chest freezer out there, the big kind, full of venison from last fall and frozen vegetables from the garden. Behind it, on a shelf I built 10 years ago, there's a box of old photos. I hadn't looked at them in years. Hadn't needed to. I needed to now. I sat on the cold concrete with the box in my lap and went through them one by one. Our wedding. Honeymoon. In Branson, which was all we could afford back then. First house. Second house. Christmases. Birthdays. Ethan, as a baby. A toddler. A kid with a gap-toothed grin holding up a fish he'd caught at the lake. I looked at the photos of Ethan for a long time. Tried to see what I hadn't let myself see before. He had Connie's eyes. Everyone said that. Her coloring, her build, that way of tilting his head when he was thinking. But there was something else too. Something in the shape of his jaw, the set of his shoulders. I'd always assumed he got that from me. Now I looked at those features and thought about James. James, who was leaner than me, finer boned. James, who had that same jaw, that same way of holding himself. I'd never noticed before. Or I'd noticed and explained it away. Brothers look alike. Of course there'd be resemblance. It didn't mean anything, except now it might mean everything. I put the photos back, closed the box, sat there in the dark garage with the freezer humming beside me and the cold seeping up through the concrete, and thought about what I was going to do. I'd found a place online that did DNA tests. Discreet, they promised. Fast results. All you needed was a sample from the child and a sample from yourself. They sold kits that looked like regular mail, nothing to raise suspicion. I'd been staring at the website for 3 days. Hadn't ordered yet, because once I knew, I couldn't unknow. Once I had that answer, I'd have to do something with it, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what that something might be. I thought about Ethan upstairs, asleep in his bed with the hallway light on. My son, my boy. Please, I thought, please let him be mine. Let me have that one thing. I ordered the kit at 2 a.m., sitting in my truck in the garage with the engine off and my breath fogging in the dark. 3-day shipping. Results in a week. 8 days from now, I'd know. No. 8 days to figure out who I was going to be when the answer came. She found the lockbox. I'd left it in the truck. Stupid. 23 years of careful, and I get sloppy in week 2. It was a Saturday. Ethan was at Tyler Brennan's house for a sleepover, some video game marathon the boys had been planning for weeks. I'd gone to the shop early to catch up on invoices, told Connie I'd be back by noon, normal Saturday. Nothing out of place. Except I'd taken the lockbox out the night before, sat in my truck in the garage, reading through everything again like a man picking at a scab, and I'd forgotten to put it back under the workbench, left it right there on the passenger seat, covered with a jacket that must have slipped off sometime in the night. Connie needed jumper cables. That's what she told me later. Her car wouldn't start, and she knew I kept cables in the truck. She wasn't snooping, wasn't suspicious, just needed cables, and there it was, a fireproof lockbox with no lock on it, because I'd been too tired and too careless to spin the combination closed. All she had to do was lift the lid. I came home at 11:30 to find her sitting at the kitchen table, the lockbox open in front of her, the phones laid out in a row, the letters spread across the wood like a losing hand of cards. She'd been crying. Or she was good at looking like she had. With Connie, I wasn't sure anymore. How long have you known? She asked. Her voice was steady, controlled. The kind of calm that comes after the first wave of panic has passed, and you've had time to build your defenses. Long enough. How long, Dale? I pulled out a chair across from her, sat down. The table between us felt like a canyon. 2 weeks, Little more. 2 weeks. And she laughed, but there was no humor in it. 2 weeks you've been walking around this house, sleeping in our bed, eating dinner with me. Yeah, funny how that works. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you? That landed. I watched it hit her, watched her flinch like I'd raised a hand. Good. Let her feel something. Let her know what it's like to be blindsided in your own kitchen. Let me explain, she said. Explain what? Connie, the 24 years, the letters from before we got married. Explain how you were fucking my brother while I was saving up for your engagement ring. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I kept my voice low, even. The opposite of screaming, which felt worse somehow. You were with him first, you chose me because he wasn't ready. And then you kept him on the side for our entire marriage. Like a backup plan, like insurance. She didn't deny it, I'd hoped she would. Hoped she'd tell me I was wrong, that I'd misread everything, that there was some explanation that would make the last 2 weeks of hell disappear like a bad dream. But she just sat there, looking at the letters, her own handwriting staring back at her. I loved you, she said finally. I need you to know that. I did love you, Dale. Did. Do. I do love you. Just not as much as you love him. Silence. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car passed on the street, tires crunching through the slush. Normal sounds. The sounds of a world that was still turning, even though mine had stopped. It's complicated, she said. No, it isn't. You made a choice 24 years ago, and then you kept making it over and over every time you went back to him. Every time you lied to my face. I leaned forward. Those texts, Connie. 8 months of plans. Hotels. Miss you. Can't wait. You were scheduling it like a goddamn business meeting. We tried to stop. After Ethan was born, after Ethan was born. The words hung there. I watched her realize what she'd said, what she'd opened. Dale, after Ethan was born, not before. Oh, please, is he mine? She went pale. Actually, pale, like someone had pulled a plug and drained all the color out of her face. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Is he mine? I don't know. 3 words, I don't know. The most honest thing she'd said in 24 years, probably, and it was the one that broke me. You don't know, I repeated. 11 years. 11 years of raising that boy, loving him, teaching him to ride a bike and throw a ball and be a decent human being, and you don't know if he's mine. I wanted him to be yours. I prayed he was yours. But you never checked, never made sure. Just rolled the dice and hoped for the best. She was crying now. Real tears, I thought. But I'd thought her tears were real on our wedding night too, so what the hell did I know? I was afraid, she said. I was afraid that if I knew for certain, I'd have to... Have to what? Tell me? Give me a choice? Let me decide whether I wanted to raise another man's child. He's your son, Dale, no matter what any test says. Don't. I stood up so fast the chair scraped back against the tile. Don't you tell me what he is. You don't get to define that anymore. You lost that right when you let my brother into our bed. It wasn't our bed. We were always careful. Oh, well, that makes it fine then. You were careful. I laughed. It sounded wrong, harsh and broken. You were careful not to screw him in our actual bed. Real considerate, Connie. Real thoughtful. I gathered the phones, the letters, put them back in the lockbox with hands that wanted to shake, but I wouldn't let them. Not in front of her. Not now. What are you going to do? She asked. I don't know yet. Dale, please, can we talk about this? Like adults? Like adults. I closed the lockbox, spun the combination lock. You want to talk like adults? After 24 years of lying to me like I was a child who couldn't handle the truth. I was trying to protect yourself. You were trying to protect yourself. Don't dress it up like it was for me or for Ethan or for anyone else. You did what you did because it was easier than being honest. I picked up the box, looked at her one more time. My wife, the mother of my son, the woman I'd built my whole life around. I ordered a DNA test, I said. Kit came yesterday. I already took my sample. I'll get Ethan's when he comes home tomorrow. Her face crumpled. Dale, please. And when I have the results, we're going to talk. About Ethan, about the house, about what happens next. I walked toward the door. Until then, I'm staying at the shop. Don't call me. What am I supposed to tell Ethan? I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. The question I'd been dreading since I found that bag under the house. Tell him I'm working on a project. Tell him I'll see him soon. I opened the door. Cold air rushed in. February biting at my face. Tell him whatever you want, Connie. You're good at that. I walked out, closed the door behind me. Didn't slam it. That would have been too easy, too dramatic. too much like the movies. Instead, I just pulled it shut, gentle and final, the soft click of the latch like a period at the end of a sentence. The truck started on the first try. The heater took a few minutes to kick in. I drove to the shop with the lockbox on the seat beside me and the taste of ash in my mouth, and I didn't cry until I was inside, with the door locked and the lights off, and nobody there to see. Then I sat on the floor with my back against the workbench, and I let it come. All of it. The rage and the grief and the sick, spinning vertigo of finding out your whole life was built on sand. I cried until I couldn't anymore. Then I got up, washed my face in the utility sink, made a pot of coffee in the old percolator I keep for late nights, and I waited for the DNA kit to tell me whether I still had a son. The DNA test took 8 days, longest 8 days of my life. I knew the answer before I opened the envelope. I think I'd known for years. I stayed at the shop, set up the old cot I keep for late night jobs, the one with the squeaky springs and the mattress that smells like dust and motor oil. Bought a space heater at the hardware store. Russ brought me coffee every morning and didn't ask questions I couldn't answer. The routine kept me sane. Up at 6, coffee, shower at the gym on Main Street. $5 for a day pass, nobody bothered you. Then work. Whatever was on the books, finish Mrs. Henderson's bathroom. Start the Kowalski deck rebuild. Even though it was too cold for outdoor work and we'd have to tent and heat the whole thing, I didn't care. I needed my hands busy, needed my mind quiet, needed something to do besides stare at the walls and wait. Ethan came by on Sunday, first day after the sleepover. Connie must have told him something, because he looked at me with those careful eyes that kids get when they know the adults are lying, but don't know about what. Mom said you're working on a big project, he said. Yeah, bud, real big. Oh, how long? I looked at him, my son. Those eyes that were Connie's, that jawline that might be mine or might be James's, that 11-year-old uncertainty that didn't understand why his dad was sleeping at the shop instead of home. I don't know yet. Couple weeks, maybe? Oh, he kicked at the concrete floor. Can I help with the project? Something cracked in my chest, a small fissure, widening. Not this one, bud. This one I gotta do myself. Okay, he stood there. I wanted to hug him, to hold him tight, and tell him everything would be fine, and none of this was his fault. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not while I still didn't know if the man he called Dad was really his father. Hey, I put my hand on his shoulder. Whatever happens, you know I love you, right? That's never gonna change. I know, Dad. Dad. The word hit different now. Heavier, like carrying a stone I might have to put down. Good, that's good. I squeezed his shoulder. Now go on. Your mom's waiting. Then I watched him walk out to Connie's car, parked at the curb. She was behind the wheel, engine running, not looking at the shop. Couldn't look at me. Good. I couldn't look at her either. The days blurred together. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, each one the same. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. I had checked the mail 3 times a day, even though I knew the results wouldn't come until at least Thursday, probably Friday. The waiting was its own kind of torture. Russ kept showing up. Didn't say much. That wasn't his way. Just appeared at the shop around 7 each morning with 2 cups from the Casey's on Route 6, black for him, cream and sugar for me. We'd drink in silence, watching the light change through the dusty windows, and then we'd get to work. You eating? He asked on Wednesday. Some. You sleeping? Some. He nodded. Didn't push. That's the thing about Russ. He understood that some pain can't be talked through. It just has to be lived through, 1 hour at a time. My cousin, he said after a while. The one Linda ran off with, Randy, hadn't seen him in 15 years before it happened. Showed up at a family reunion, all smiles and handshakes, and 3 months later he's living in my house and I'm sleeping in my truck. I looked at him. He'd never told me the details before. Just the broad strokes, second wife, cheated, left. What'd you do? Drank, for about 3 years. Then my liver quit and I had to find another way. He finished his coffee. Crumpled the cup. Point is, the drinking didn't help. The anger didn't help. Only thing that helped was time, and deciding I wasn't going to let them take any more from me than they already had. How do you decide that? Hell if I know. You just do. One day you wake up and you realize you're still here, and they're not worth dying over. He stood up, knees cracking. Come on, those deck boards aren't going to install themselves. Thursday afternoon, I was at the Kowalski site, working under the tarp we'd rigged up, when my phone buzzed. Text from the lab. Your results are ready. Check your email or wait for mail delivery. I stood there with a nail gun in one hand and my phone in the other, the plastic sheeting snapping in the wind, and I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The moment I'd been waiting for, dreading, praying about for 8 days, it was here. Russ looked up from the other end of the deck. What? Results are in. He set down his hammer. Didn't say anything, just waited. I can't, my voice caught. I can't look at it here. I need to go. He jerked his chin toward my truck. I'll finish up. I drove to the grain elevator. Same place I'd read the letters. Seemed right, somehow. Full circle. The place where my old life ended and whatever came next began. The email was short, clinical. Thank you for choosing our services. Please find your results attached. For questions, contact our support team. I opened the attachment. The document was 3 pages long. Methodology, legal disclaimers, charts and graphs I didn't understand. And then, at the bottom of page 2, the number that mattered, combined paternity index 0, probability of paternity 0.0. Says I read it again and again, as if the numbers might change, might rearrange themselves into something I could live with. Probability of paternity 0.0%, 0, not unlikely, not inconclusive, 0. Ethan wasn't mine. I set the phone down on the dashboard. The screen went dark. The cab of the truck was quiet except for the heater running and the wind outside, pushing against the windows like something trying to get in. 11 years. Every birthday, every Christmas, every scraped knee and nightmare and proud moment when he learned to ride a bike, hit his first baseball, read his first chapter book by himself. Every time I'd said, "That's my boy," and meant it with my whole heart. Probability 0.0%. I picked up the phone, opened the report again. There was more. Genetic markers, allele frequencies, numbers that proved beyond any doubt what I already knew. Ethan was James's son, had been since the day he was born, and Connie had known or suspected the whole time. I don't know how long I sat there. The sun moved across the sky, shadows lengthening through the windshield, and I didn't move. Couldn't move. Like the news had turned me to stone. I thought about the day Ethan was born. March 15th, 2014. Late winter, just like now. Connie in labor for 18 hours. Me holding her hand, counting through contractions, telling her she was doing great, and then that moment when the doctor lifted him up, red and squalling, and put him in my arms. I'd cried, stood there in that hospital room with my son in my arms, and cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child, myself. I remember thinking, this is it, this is what it's all for. Everything I've worked for, everything I've built, it was all leading to this. He wasn't mine. He was never mine. I got out of the truck. The cold hit me like a slap, February wind cutting through my jacket, but I didn't care. I walked toward the grain elevator, that rusting monument to a past that didn't exist anymore, and I stood at its base and looked up. 100 feet of concrete and steel, built to hold something, built to last, and now it was empty, just like me. I don't remember deciding to scream. 1 second I was standing there, and the next I was on my knees in the frozen dirt, hands flat on the ground, howling at the gray sky like an animal. The sound came from somewhere deep, somewhere I didn't know existed, and it tore out of me in waves until my throat was raw and my chest was hollow and there was nothing left. Then silence. Just the wind. The creak of metal somewhere in the elevator's bones. My own ragged breathing. I stayed there, kneeling in the dirt, hands so cold they'd stopped hurting. What now? The question sat in the emptiness where the scream had been. What now? What do you do when everything you built turns out to be someone else's? When the son you raised isn't your son? When your brother took not just your wife but your whole goddamn legacy? I thought about my father. 4 years dead now, buried in the cemetery on the edge of town next to my mother's empty plot. He'd liked Ethan, loved him really. Took him fishing, taught him to whittle, told him stories about the old days when this was all farmland and everyone knew everyone. He died thinking Ethan was his grandson, his blood, the continuation of the Mercer line. He was wrong, I thought. We were all wrong. And then another thought, darker. The one I'd been pushing down since I first did the math. James knew. He had to know. The timing was too close. Ethan was born 9 months after that Christmas when James stayed with us for a week. 9 months after Connie's mysterious flu that kept her home from my company's New Year's party. 9 months after I came home from a late job to find them both in the living room, watching TV, acting natural, acting like everything was fine. He knew. And he let me raise his son anyway. I drove back to the shop as the sun went down, parked, sat in the truck with the engine off until my fingers went numb and my breath started fogging thick enough to block the windshield. The lockbox was inside, the phones, the letters, and now, on my phone, the test results. A complete file. Everything I needed to blow up 3 lives and maybe more. I could go to Connie, show her the results, watch her face when she realized the lie was over. I could call James, let him hear it in my voice, let him know I knew what he'd done. I could walk into a lawyer's office tomorrow morning and start the process. Divorce, custody, the whole ugly machinery of ending a marriage. But then I thought about Ethan, not the DNA, not the percentage, just Ethan, the boy who called me dad, who texted me 3 times today asking when I was coming home, who didn't understand any of this and shouldn't have to. He was 11 years old. He had a life, school, friends, basketball practice. That girl in his class he thought was cute but wouldn't admit it. He had a room full of posters and a dog-eared copy of Harry Potter on his nightstand, and a drawer full of birthday cards I'd signed Love Dad every year since he could read. What would the truth do to him? I sat with that question as the dark came down. The shop windows were black mirrors now, reflecting nothing, showing nothing. Inside, the space heater was probably still running, keeping the cot warm, keeping the coffee pot ready, my little bunker, my holding cell while I figured out how to survive. I pulled out my wallet, found the letter I'd been carrying for 2 weeks, the one from August 1999, folded so many times the creases were starting to tear. He asked me last night. I said yes. Please understand, this is the only way. I read it again, then I folded it and put it back. Then I pulled out the test results on my phone. Looked at that number one more time. Probability of paternity, 0.0, and I realized something. I'd been so focused on what I'd lost, the marriage, the trust, the biological connection to my son, that I'd forgotten to ask what I still had. Ethan didn't know. To him, I was still dad. Still, the guy who taught him to throw, helped him with homework, showed up at every game and concert and parent-teacher conference. None of that had changed. The memories were real, even if the DNA wasn't. James might have provided the genetic material, but I was the one who'd been there. Every day, for 11 years, that had to count for something. Didn't it? I got out of the truck, walked into the shop, turned on the light. The cot was there. The coffee pot. The lockbox on the workbench, still holding its cargo of evidence and betrayal. I made a pot of coffee, sat down on the cot with the cup warming my hands, and I started to think not about what had been taken from me, but about what I wasn't willing to give up. I didn't talk to anyone for 3 days. Not Russ, not Connie, not even Ethan when he texted asking where I was. I didn't have words left. Just the question, what kind of man am I going to be now? I told Russ I needed time. He nodded, didn't argue, just said, you know where to find me, and drove off in his beat-up Chevy, leaving me alone at the shop with the coffee pot and the space heater and the silence. The silence was the hardest part. I'd spent my whole life surrounded by noise. Power tools, truck engines, job site chatter, Ethan's music thumping through the ceiling, Connie calling from the kitchen that dinner was ready. Now there was nothing, just the hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the building settling and my own thoughts, circling like vultures over carrion. I drove out to the grain elevator on the second day. Not to scream this time, I was empty of that, just to sit, to look at the flat white fields and the gray sky and the skeletal trees and feel how small I was against all that emptiness. Iowa in February, nothing pretty about it, just honest, cold and flat and endless, the kind of landscape that doesn't lie to you, doesn't dress itself up, doesn't pretend to be something it's not. I envied it. I sat in the truck with the engine off, watching my breath fog and fade, fog and fade. The test results were still on my phone. I'd stopped looking at them. Didn't need to. The number was burned into my brain like a brand. 0.0% I thought about Ethan. Not the DNA. I was trying not to think about the DNA. Just Ethan, the kid himself, his laugh, that snorting thing he does when something really gets him. The way he chews his lip when he's concentrating. How he still hugs me goodnight, even though he's at the age where most boys stop doing that. 11 years of those moments. 11 years of being dad. Was I supposed to just stop? The thought made my chest tight, because that was the question, wasn't it? Not what Connie had done, not what James had done. That was finished, already happened, couldn't be changed. The question was what I was going to do now, who I was going to be to that boy when the dust settled. I could tell him, sit him down, explain that the man he called dad wasn't really his father. Watch his face as the world he knew collapsed the same way mine had. He was 11. What would that do to him? Or I could say nothing. Keep the secret. Let him grow up believing the lie, the same lie I'd believed for 23 years. Protect him from the truth the way no one had protected me. But that felt wrong too. Like I'd be doing to him what Connie had done to me, deciding what he deserved to know, playing God with someone else's reality. There was a third option, the hardest one. I could tell him I wasn't his biological father, but that I was still his dad, that blood didn't make family, that I'd chosen him every day for 11 years, and I was choosing him still. Would he believe that? Would it be enough? I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore. The sun was going down when I finally got out of the truck. The cold bit into me immediately, must have been single digits with the wind chill, but I walked toward the elevator anyway, stood at its base, looking up at all that rusting steel against the darkening sky. My father brought me here once when I was about Ethan's age. The elevator was still running then, still full of grain and purpose. He'd explained how it worked, the augers, the scales, the loading systems. I'd been bored out of my mind, but I'd pretended to listen because that's what you did with Dad. You listened. This is what built this town, he'd said. Grain, land, people who showed up and did the work. I hadn't thought about that in years. But standing here now, in the place where everything had fallen apart, I remembered it with sudden clarity. The sound of his voice, the smell of his jacket, motor oil and Old Spice. The way he'd put his hand on my shoulder, heavy and warm, and said, that's what matters, Dale. Not the money, not the glory, just showing up, doing the work, being there. Being there. I'd been there. Every day for 11 years, every skinned knee and spelling test and Saturday morning cartoon, every argument about bedtime, every negotiation about vegetables, every proud moment when he figured something out on his own and looked at me to make sure I'd seen. James hadn't been there. James had been in Chicago, St. Louis, wherever the hell his job took him. James had provided the DNA and then vanished, leaving me to do the actual work of raising a child. Did that count for nothing? The wind picked up, cutting through my jacket, and I shoved my hands in my pockets. My fingers found the letter, that goddamn letter I couldn't stop carrying. I pulled it out. He's a good man. That's the worst part. He doesn't deserve what we're doing to him. She was right about that, at least. I didn't deserve it, but Ethan didn't deserve any of this either. He didn't ask to be born into a lie. He didn't choose his parents, biological or otherwise. He was just a kid, trying to figure out the world, trusting the adults in his life to keep him safe. I'd failed him, not in the raising. I'd done that right, or as right as anyone can. But I'd failed him by not seeing what was happening around him, by not asking questions, by choosing the comfort of ignorance over the pain of truth. I couldn't change that now. But I could choose what happened next. I read the letter one more time. Then I tore it in half. Then in quarters. Then into pieces so small, the wind snatched them from my fingers and scattered them across the frozen ground. It felt like surgery, like cutting out something that had been poisoning me. I watched the pieces disappear into the snow in the fading light, and I thought about what my father had said. Being there, doing the work. That was what made a father. Not blood, not genetics, not some percentage on a lab report. Just showing up every day, no matter what. I walked back to the truck, got in, started the engine. For the first time in 3 days, I knew what I had to do. I had to talk to James, face to face. Not to fight, though part of me still wanted that. Wanted to feel my fist connect with his jaw and watch him bleed the way I'd been bleeding. But violence wouldn't give me what I needed, wouldn't give Ethan what he needed. I had to look my brother in the eye and tell him, "You're not taking my son." The biological reality didn't matter. The test results didn't matter. What mattered was 11 years of being dad, and I wasn't giving that up. Not to James, not to anyone. The drive back to town was quiet. The radio stayed off. The heater hummed, warming my hands and feet. The house is still standing, I thought. That's got to count for something. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going. I called my brother and told him to meet me at the old fishing spot by the river. Same place we used to go with Dad. Seemed right to end things where they started. He picked up on the second ring. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks. Not since before the crawl space, before the letters, before everything. Dale. He sounded cautious, guarded. Connie must have told him. We need to talk. In person. I'm not sure that's a good... I'm not asking, James. I'm telling. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock. The fishing spot on Miller's Creek. Silence. I could hear him breathing, calculating, trying to figure out if this was a trap. Good. Let him sweat. Okay, he said finally. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Come alone. Dale, I hung up. The spot was about 20 minutes outside town, down a gravel road that hadn't been maintained since Reagan was president. Miller's Creek wasn't much, a trickle of water through mud banks, lined with bare cottonwoods and thick underbrush. In summer, it was pretty enough. In February, it was gray and cold and dead, the water dark and sluggish under a skin of ice near the banks. Dad used to bring us here when we were kids. James and me, 2 boys with cane poles and a bucket of worms, fishing for bluegill and dreaming about catching bass. We'd spend whole Saturdays out here, not talking much, just being. Father and sons, brothers. That was a long time ago. I got there early, parked the truck, walked down to the water's edge. The cold was brutal, the kind that gets in your teeth, makes your eyes water. I didn't care. I needed to be here first. Needed to stand on this ground and remember who I was before everything got complicated. I thought about Dad, how he'd taught us to bait hooks, cast lines, be patient, how he'd never rushed us, never made us feel like we were wasting his time. He had this way of being present, fully present, that I didn't appreciate until I was grown and realized how rare it was. He'd love both of us, I knew that. But there had always been something different between him and me, an understanding, a recognition, like he saw himself in me in a way he didn't see in James. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe that was where all of this started. James's Audi pulled up around 250, silver, spotless, catching the thin winter light. He got out slowly, like a man approaching a dog he wasn't sure would bite. He looked older than I remembered, thinner. His coat was expensive, cashmere probably, but it hung on him wrong, like he'd lost weight recently. His face was drawn, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't been sleeping. Good. Dale. He stopped about 10 feet away, kept his hands visible like I might pull a gun on him. James. We stood there, brothers, Strangers. The creek murmured behind me, dark water sliding over rocks. Connie told me you found everything. Yeah. He nodded, looked down at his shoes. Italian leather, probably. Getting muddy in the frozen ground. I don't know what to say. That's convenient. I mean it. I've been trying to figure out, for weeks now, what I could possibly say to you, and I've got nothing. He looked up. His eyes were wet. Tears or cold, I couldn't tell. I'm sorry, Dale. I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. Sorry for what? For screwing my wife? For doing it before she was even my wife? For letting me raise your son while you ran off to play executive in whatever city was paying you that year? Each question landed like a fist. He flinched at every one. Part of me enjoyed it. The cruel part, the wounded animal part that wanted to see him bleed. But another part was tired. So goddamn tired of carrying all this anger. You want to know why? He asked. I want to know if you have any excuse that's worth hearing. I don't have an excuse. I have an explanation. It's not the same thing. Try me. He moved to a fallen log near the water's edge, sat down like his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. I stayed standing. Advantage of height, advantage of not looking weak. You remember when Dad got sick? He asked. That first time, when we thought he might not make it? 2015. Pneumonia. Yeah, I flew back, stayed for a week. You were there the whole time, you and Connie and Ethan. The whole family, rallying around him. And so? So one night, late, you were asleep in the waiting room. I was sitting with him. Just the two of us. And he woke up, looked at me, and he said, James's voice cracked. He cleared his throat. He said, I always knew Dale would be fine. He's the one I never had to worry about. I worried about you every day of your life. I didn't say anything. Let the words hang in the cold air. And then he said, Dale's going to carry this family. He's the strong one. He always was. And he went back to sleep. James looked at me. That was the last real conversation we ever had. He died 3 weeks later. I know when he died, I was there. I know you were. You were always there. That's my point. He spread his hands, a gesture of helplessness. My whole life, I was the screw-up, the disappointment, the one Dad worried about. You were the golden boy, the reliable one, the son he was proud of. So you decided to take my wife? Because Dad liked me better? No. I mean, he shook his head. It's not that simple. Connie and I, we started before you were even in the picture. We were young, it was intense, and then it fell apart the way those things do, and she moved on. To you. She didn't move on. She kept you on the side. I know she did, and I should have stopped it. I should have told her no, should have walked away, should have... His voice broke again. I should have been a better brother, a better man, but I wasn't. Because every time I saw you with her, with the house, with the life, with Dad looking at you like you hung the moon, I wanted something that was yours. I wanted to prove I could take something from the golden boy. I listened to him, didn't interrupt. Let him get it all out. The years of feeling invisible, the resentment that had festered since childhood, the way he'd convinced himself that what he was doing with Connie was somehow justified because I had everything and he had nothing. It was pathetic and sad and in some twisted way almost understandable. Almost. You done? I asked when he finally ran out of words. He nodded, wiped his face with the back of his hand, waited. Here's what I heard, I said. You felt bad about yourself. Dad made you feel like the screw-up. So instead of working on that, instead of building your own life and being your own man, you decided to tear down mine. That about right? He didn't answer. Didn't need to. You took my wife. Fine. That marriage was a lie from the start, apparently, and maybe I'm better off knowing it. I took a step closer. But then you gave me a son, or you made a son, and you let me raise him. For 11 years. While you were off living your life, I was the one teaching him to ride a bike. I was the one helping with homework. I was the one sitting up with him when he had nightmares, driving him to practice, showing up at every game and play and parent-teacher conference. James looked at the ground. His shoulders were shaking, crying, maybe. I didn't care. You know what that makes you? I asked. Not a father, a sperm donor. You provided the DNA and then you disappeared. That's not fatherhood. That's biology. I know. Do you? Do you really? I was close enough now to grab him, to hit him, to do any of the things the angry part of me had been fantasizing about for weeks. But I didn't. I just stood there, looking down at the man who used to be my brother. I know I don't have any right to him, James said. I know that. I've known it since he was born. That's why I stayed away. That's why you let me do all the work. While you swooped in twice a year for Christmas and birthdays, played the fun uncle, and then left again. Yeah. The honesty surprised me. I'd expected more deflection, more excuses. What do you want from me, Dale? he asked. You want me to disappear? I'll disappear. You want me to sign something? Give up any legal claim? I'll do it. Whatever you need. I don't need anything from you. Then why did you call me here? I looked at him, my little brother. The kid I used to protect from bullies in grade school, the teenager I taught to drive in Dad's old Chevy, the man I asked to stand beside me at my wedding, not knowing he'd already stood beside my bride in ways I couldn't imagine. We'd been so many things to each other, now we were this. I called you here to tell you one thing, I said, and I need you to hear it, really hear it, because I'm only going to say it once. He nodded, waiting. Ethan is my son. James opened his mouth. I held up a hand. I don't care what the test says. I don't care about DNA or biology or any of that. I raised him. I love him. He calls me Dad, and I've earned that name every single day for 11 years. That's not changing. I'm not trying to... I know you're not. But I need you to understand, if you ever try to tell him different, if you try to claim him, if you show up with some story about being his real father, I will end you. Not physically. I mean, I will destroy whatever's left of your life. Every secret, every lie, everything you've ever done, I'll make sure everyone knows. Mom, your job, everyone. James went pale. Dale, I would never... Good, then we're clear. I turned away, started walking back toward my truck. Dale, wait. I stopped, didn't turn around. What about us? His voice was small, broken. Brothers, is there any chance we could ever... I don't know. The words hung in the cold air. Honest. The most honest thing I'd said to him in years, maybe ever. I don't know if I can forgive you, maybe someday, maybe never. But right now, I can't even look at you without seeing everything you took from me. I understand. No, you don't. You can't. I turned around, looked at him one last time. But here's what I do know. I'm not going to let what you did define the rest of my life. I'm not going to let your weakness make me weak. I'm going to go home, and I'm going to figure out how to be Ethan's father through this mess, and I'm going to build something new. Without Connie, without you, something that's actually mine. James nodded. His face was wet with tears, and for once I believed they were real. I'm sorry, Dale. I know it doesn't matter, but I'm sorry. I walked to my truck, got in, started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see him still standing by the water, small against the gray sky, a man who'd spent his whole life wanting what his brother had, and in the end, had nothing to show for it. I drove away without looking back. The sun was setting by the time I got back to town. Oranges and pinks bleeding across the horizon, the kind of sky that makes you believe in something bigger than yourself. I didn't go to the shop. For the first time in weeks, I didn't want to hide. I pulled up outside my house, Connie's house now, I supposed, though the lawyers would sort that out eventually. Ethan's bike was in the driveway, dropped carelessly on its side, the way he always left it. No matter how many times I told him to use the kickstand, I sat in the truck for a minute, breathing, thinking. Then I got out and walked to the front door. Connie opened it before I could knock. She looked terrible. Red eyes, unwashed hair, the look of someone who'd been crying for days. Dale, I didn't expect... I'm not here for you, I said. I'm here for Ethan. He's in his room. He's been asking about you every day. I know. I walked past her, down the hallway to his door. Knocked twice. Yeah? It's Dad. Can I come in? A pause. Then, yeah. I opened the door. He was on his bed, phone in hand, looking at me with those eyes, Connie's eyes, that held more questions than an 11-year-old should have to carry. Hey, bud. Hey. I sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress creaked under my weight. On the nightstand, his dog-eared copy of Harry Potter. On the wall, his basketball posters, his whole small world, untouched by everything that had happened in mine. I'm sorry I've been gone, I said. There's some stuff going on between me and your mom, grown-up stuff. It's not your fault, and I should have been around more to tell you that. Are you getting divorced? The directness of it hit me like a punch. Kids don't soften things. They just ask. I don't know yet. Maybe. Probably. I took a breath. But here's what I do know. Whatever happens between me and your mom, it doesn't change anything between you and me. I'm your dad. That's not going to stop. Ever. He looked at me for a long moment, processing. Then he nodded. Okay. Yeah. He shrugged. The way kids do when they're trying to act like something doesn't matter, even though it does. I figured. I mean, you're my dad. That's how it is. Something broke open in my chest. Not the bad kind of breaking. The other kind. The kind that lets the light in. Yeah, bud, I said. That's how it is. I hugged him. He let me. And for a moment, sitting there in his room with the basketball posters and the Harry Potter book and the bike that was definitely going to rust if he didn't start putting it in the garage, everything was exactly what it was supposed to be. Not perfect, not fixed, but real. And real was enough. It took me 2 weeks to fix everything in that house. The pipes, the drywall patch in the hallway where Ethan had accidentally put his elbow through it last summer, the back door that always stuck when the weather got cold. Might as well leave it better than I found it. Connie stayed out of my way. We'd talked, really talked, 3 days after I came back for Ethan. Not about fixing things between us. That ship had sailed and sunk and was resting on the ocean floor. But about logistics, the house, the lawyers, how we were going to tell Ethan enough of the truth without breaking him. She'd cried, apologized, said all the things you'd expect a person to say when they've been caught in a lie that lasted longer than some people's entire marriages. I listened. Didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't do any of the things I'd imagined doing in those dark nights at the shop. I just listened. And when she was done, I said, I don't forgive you. Maybe I will someday. But right now, I need you to know that I'm going to be okay. And Ethan's going to be okay. That's all that matters. She'd nodded, wiped her face, and that was that. The last thing I fixed was the pipes, full circle. I crawled back into that crawl space on a Saturday morning in late March. The ground wasn't frozen anymore, soft with spring melt, smelling like wet earth and new beginnings. I checked every joint, every seal, every inch of insulation, made sure it was all done right. When I got to the main line, I paused. This was where the bag had been, the phones, the letters, the end of one life and the beginning of another. There was nothing there now, just pipes and insulation in the quiet dark. I put my hand on the main line, cold metal warming slowly under my palm. Some things you fix, I said to no one. Some things you walk away from. Wisdom's knowing which is which. I crawled out into the light. That afternoon, Ethan came by the shop. He'd started doing that, riding his bike over after school, hanging out while I worked, learning how to use a level and a tape measure, and all the other tools that had shaped my life. He was getting good, natural even. Something in the way he held the tools, the way he measured twice before cutting once, that reminded me of my father, of myself. Biology had nothing to do with it. Dad? He was checking the bubble on a level I'd placed against a cabinet door. We were doing a small job for Mrs. Patterson, new shelves in her mudroom. Yeah, bud? Are we going to be okay? I stopped what I was doing, looked at him. 11 years old, almost 12 now, right on the edge of everything. Childhood behind him, the chaos of adolescence ahead. He'd handled the past 2 months better than I had, probably. Kids are resilient, or maybe they're just better at accepting what is, instead of mourning what should have been. Yeah, I said. We're going to be okay. He nodded, went back to the level. The bubble settled in the center, perfectly balanced. Good, he said, because I was thinking, maybe this summer we could go fishing, like you and Grandpa used to do. You've told me about that spot by the creek, Miller's Creek, where I'd confronted James, where my father had taught us both to bait hooks and wait. You want to go there? Yeah. I mean, if that's okay. I thought about it, the memories that place held now, the anger, the grief, the moment I'd watched my brother cry and couldn't make myself care. But before all that, there had been other memories, better ones. My father's hand on my shoulder, the smell of his jacket, 2 boys with cane poles, dreaming about catching the big one. Maybe it was time to make new memories there, better ones, the kind that could sit alongside the old without erasing them. Yeah, Bud, I said. I'd like that. He grinned, that 11-year-old grin that still had some of the kid in it, even as the man was starting to show through. Cool, I'll hold you to it. I know you will. I went back to work. He went back to the level. Outside, the March sun was warm through the shop windows, the snow finally gone. The world starting to green up after the long gray winter. I thought about everything that had happened, the crawl space, the letters, the scream at the grain elevator, the long nights in this very shop, alone with the coffee pot and the space heater and the certainty that my life was over. It wasn't over. It was just different. The house was still standing. Different now, Connie's house. Not ours, but standing. The shop was still standing, same as always, smelling like sawdust and motor oil and the work I'd built my life around. And I was still standing. Not the same man I'd been in January. That man died somewhere in a crawl space in Iowa, holding love letters addressed to his brother. But the man who'd crawled out, he was still here, still breathing, still showing up, still being Dad. I looked at Ethan, bent over his work, tongue poking out the way it always did when he was concentrating. My son, not by blood, by choice. By 11 years of showing up and doing the work. That had to count for something. It counted for everything.